The Tesla Theater stage gleamed under the glow of massive studio lights. Its polished floors and futuristic chairs gave the air of a Silicon Valley showcase rather than a typical talk show. At the center sat Oprah Winfrey, America's media titan, whose voice had shaped culture and inspired millions. Tonight she was hosting a much-hyped special titled Faith, Science, and the Future of Humanity, a program featuring visionaries, spiritual leaders, and cultural icons. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their applause echoing through the cavernous hall as the cameras rolled live to millions around the world. But beneath Oprah's warm smile lay a calculated plan, known only to her producers, to challenge the faith of her special guest, Elon Musk. Oprah had faced world leaders, CEOs, and spiritual gurus before, but Musk was different. He wasn't just an entrepreneur. He was the man trying to colonize Mars, rewire human brains with Neuralink, and reinvent energy itself. Musk often spoke cryptically about God, the universe, and his search for truth. Tonight, Oprah intended to press him, to corner him, and expose contradictions before a global audience. As Elon Musk walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted. His black suit was neat but understated, his eyes calm yet distant, as though he was calculating probabilities even in this very moment. In his pocket rested a small notebook where he sometimes scribbled equations, reminders of how he viewed life, through both logic and wonder. The applause softened, and tension filled the air. Oprah leaned forward, her practiced smile in place, though her eyes flickered with calculation. "Elon, welcome," she said warmly, her voice carrying that soothing tone millions trusted. "You've reshaped industries. Tonight, we want to hear about what shapes you. We're here to talk about science, hope, and faith." Musk nodded slightly, his voice low but steady. "Thank you, Oprah. I'm glad to be here. These things matter more than rockets and cars. They're about the meaning behind it all." The audience leaned in. They weren't here just for talk of SpaceX or Tesla. They wanted something deeper. Musk knew it too. Before arriving, he had whispered a simple prayer. Yes, prayer. Despite being known as a man of science, Musk carried a quiet faith, one he rarely spoke of publicly. He didn't come to argue, but he also wasn't about to retreat if truth itself was tested. Oprah began with light questions about Mars, artificial intelligence, and Musk's unusual upbringing in South Africa. His humor, dry and unexpected, drew chuckles from the crowd. But Oprah wasn't here for small talk. She leaned in, her tone sharpening. "Elon," she said, her smile steady but her eyes probing. "You've mentioned before that you believe in God, or at least in some higher truth. But in a world as diverse as ours, where billions follow different faiths, isn't it outdated, even dangerous, to insist there might be only one truth about the universe?" The studio went quiet. It wasn't a question about rockets or batteries. It was a dart aimed straight at Musk's soul. The silence in the Tesla Theater was electric. Oprah's question had landed like a precision strike, aimed at unraveling Elon Musk's beliefs before millions of viewers. Cameras zoomed in on Musk's face, searching for hesitation, doubt, or a stumble. But Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back slightly in his chair, his posture calm, his expression unreadable, like a man running complex simulations in his mind before choosing his words. Finally he spoke, his voice soft yet firm. "Oprah, truth isn't something that changes because people want it to. The universe doesn't bend to our feelings or preferences. Physics doesn't care if we like the rules, and neither does truth about why we exist." A ripple ran through the audience. Some nodded, intrigued by the mix of science and conviction. Others shifted uncomfortably, sensing where this might be going. Musk continued, his eyes fixed not on Oprah but on the crowd. "I met a woman in Texas once. She worked at a diner near one of our SpaceX sites. Her name was Sarah. She told me she'd lost everything. Her husband, her job, almost her home. But every morning, she said, she sat at her table and prayed. She wasn't asking for money or for things to magically get easier. She prayed for strength. And she told me her faith in Jesus was the only reason she kept going. For her, it wasn't theory, it was survival. The room shifted. The audience, expecting lofty talk about Mars and AI, felt the weight of something raw and human. Some dabbed their eyes. Others stared, processing the unusual vulnerability from a man known more for algorithms than personal stories. Oprah, though still smiling, tried to pull the conversation back into her territory. "That's a touching story, Elon," she said, her tone carrying a slight edge. "But I wasn't asking about individual experiences. I'm asking if your belief that Jesus is the only way makes sense in a world where billions find meaning through other paths. Doesn't that sound exclusive? Even arrogant?" Gasps and murmurs rippled through the studio. Oprah's words carried weight. She was voicing what many were thinking. Inclusivity was her brand. Her empire was built on the belief that all paths, from meditation to self-help, led to peace. Musk's insistence on one truth seemed to stand against that. Elon paused, then leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Oprah, I'm not here to impose anything on anyone. That's not who I am. But if you ask me about my faith, I'll tell you the truth. Jesus said, 'I am the way, the truth, and the life.' Those aren't my words. They're his. I can't edit that, even if it makes people uncomfortable. People are free to choose what they want, but I can't deny what I've found to be real." The audience sat frozen, absorbing the quiet conviction in his voice. Some clapped softly, unsure but moved. Musk hadn't raised his tone, hadn't lashed out. He spoke with the same certainty he used when describing the laws of physics or orbital mechanics. Oprah's eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't used to losing control of an exchange. "So let me ask you directly," she pressed, her voice sharper now. "Do you believe that billions of people, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, are simply wrong?" It was the perfect trap. If Musk said yes, he'd be painted as arrogant and intolerant. If he said no, he'd contradict his own faith. The air grew heavy, the audience hanging on his response. Elon Musk closed his eyes for a brief moment, as though whispering a silent plea for wisdom. When he opened them, his gaze was steady, his voice calm but piercing. "Oprah, truth isn't decided by a popularity vote. If a bridge is broken, I won't tell people it's safe to cross just because they want to believe it. That's not judgment, it's honesty. My faith isn't about condemning others. It's about warning them of danger and offering hope. People can reject it, but I'd be lying if I pretended all paths lead to the same place. The universe doesn't work that way, and neither does eternity." The words hit like a thunderclap. Some in the audience applauded with conviction. Others sat stunned, caught between admiration and discomfort. Oprah's smile wavered for the first time that night. She had expected a sparring match. Instead, Musk was turning the conversation into something deeper, something she hadn't planned for. The studio lights glared brighter as if amplifying the tension in the room. Oprah straightened in her chair, her practiced composure beginning to strain. For decades, she had been the master of the narrative, guiding guests into her carefully crafted vision of spirituality. Broad, inclusive, profitable. But Elon Musk wasn't playing by those rules. He wasn't dodging, he wasn't softening, and, most dangerously, he wasn't intimidated. Oprah leaned in, her voice calm but with steel underneath. "Elon, you've used your faith in interviews and speeches. Some critics say you're leveraging it to connect with people, maybe even to manipulate them. Isn't faith in your hands just another tool of influence?" The question landed like a grenade. The audience stirred, whispers rising. In politics and business, accusations of using religion as a prop were old, familiar, and damning. Cameras zoomed in on Musk's face, searching for cracks, but Elon didn't blink. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn piece of folded paper. He looked at it briefly, then placed it gently on his knee. His voice dropped lower, softer, but the room leaned in as if pulled by gravity. "Oprah," he said, "let me tell you about a boy named Daniel from California. He was 12 years old, fighting a rare bone cancer. His mother wrote me a letter after he watched one of my speeches where I spoke not about rockets, but about how faith gives us hope in the darkest times. She said her son grabbed her hand and whispered, "If even Elon Musk believes God loves me, then I'm not afraid anymore." Musk paused. The silence in the studio was deafening. His eyes scanned the crowd, not for effect, but with the sincerity of someone who wanted every word to matter. "I didn't talk about God that day to win anyone's vote or to boost my image. I said it because people like Daniel and mothers like his deserve something real to hold on to. My faith isn't a tool. It's the reason I do what I do." For a long moment, the room was still. Then, slowly, soft applause rose. Some audience members wiped away tears. Others nodded solemnly, as if the story had pierced through the polish of television and struck something deeper. Oprah's eyes flickered. She hadn't expected that. She had built her empire on stories, on connecting through human emotion. But Musk's words weren't polished or rehearsed. They were raw, unfiltered, and profoundly real. Recovering quickly, she pivoted, her tone sharp again. "That's powerful, Elon, but let's step back. You keep saying your path, Christianity, is the truth. In a world where billions find peace in meditation, in Buddhism, in self-discovery, are you saying all of that is worthless? Are you dismissing the wisdom of ancient traditions and the joy people find outside your faith?" The audience murmured in agreement. Oprah had voiced what many were thinking. For years, she had preached that spirituality was a vast tapestry where every thread mattered. Musk's insistence on one truth threatened that narrative. Elon leaned back, folding his hands together, and gave her a look that was both respectful and unyielding. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Oprah, I respect that people find meaning in many different ways. But let me ask you this. If a child is about to walk into a burning building, do you tell them there are many doors, or do you point them to the one safe exit? I'm not dismissing other paths. I'm saying there is only one that leads to life. To me, that's not arrogance. It's responsibility." The analogy struck the audience like a bolt of lightning. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by scattered applause. Stronger this time, more convicted. The words were simple but devastatingly clear. Oprah's smile faltered. For the first time, the audience wasn't just with her. They were turning toward him, caught by the gravity of his conviction. She forced a smile, her voice tightening. "That's a vivid metaphor, Elon. But aren't you afraid that by saying things like this, you're undermining everything I've built? My courses, my books, my programs, they've helped millions find peace. Are you saying that's meaningless?" It was her trap, her last weapon, to force him into dismissing her legacy, alienating the audience who revered her. Elon looked at her, his eyes filled with an unexpected compassion. "Oprah, I don't doubt you've helped people feel better. Your encouragement, your kindness, those things matter. But peace that ends when the course is over, or when the money runs out, isn't enough. People need hope that doesn't fade. And I believe only Jesus gives that." The studio fell silent again, the kind of silence that feels sacred. Cameras captured the audience's faces, some stunned, some tearful, others quietly wrestling with the implications. For the first time in her career, Oprah felt something she wasn't used to, the ground shifting under her feet. The studio atmosphere had transformed. What was supposed to be a controlled, polished broadcast now felt like a raw confrontation with truth itself. The audience, many of them longtime admirers of Oprah, were no longer simply nodding along with her. Their eyes flickered between her and Elon Musk, sensing the weight of something bigger than a TV special. Oprah adjusted her seat, crossing her legs with deliberate composure. Her voice came measured but sharp, the kind of tone she used when reclaiming ground. "Elon, you keep talking about salvation and truth, as if it all comes down to your Jesus. But billions of people around the world follow other traditions. Buddhism, Islam, humanism, self-discovery. They all bring joy, meaning, and wisdom. Are you saying they're all misguided? That only your way counts?" The question was a masterstroke. The audience perked up, some clapping softly in agreement. Oprah was their champion, the voice that had introduced them to meditation, mindfulness, and modern spirituality. Her empire was built on inclusivity, on weaving together many paths. Musk's words threatened that fabric. For a moment, Musk was silent. He stared at the floor, almost as if replaying equations in his mind, before raising his eyes. His voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. Oprah, I searched everywhere before I found what I believe. I read the philosophers, I studied religions, I dove into science so deeply I thought it would answer everything. But nothing filled the emptiness, not until I met Jesus. Not a system, not an idea, but a person who met me where I was, broken, searching, even skeptical. That wasn't arrogance. That was surrender. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the audience, his words carrying the clarity of a man who had tested every theory. Oprah, your work has helped people feel better. And that matters. But feeling better isn't the same as being saved. Temporary peace can't answer the ultimate questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? I believe only Jesus can answer those questions. If I didn't tell you that, I'd be lying. The silence that followed was heavy, charged. Some audience members wiped tears from their faces. Others sat motionless, the vulnerability in Musk's words crashing against their assumptions. Oprah's jaw tightened. She had spent decades selling empowerment, convincing millions the truth could be shaped to fit their needs. Musk's words were unraveling that narrative in front of her. Desperation tinged her next question. Elon, let's be honest. You're a global figure. When you speak about Jesus as the only way, you're not just sharing a personal belief. You're shaping how people think, how they vote, how they live. Isn't that dangerous? Isn't that power you're wielding? Maybe even manipulative? Gasps rippled through the audience. It was the boldest accusation yet, implying Musk's faith was a weapon of control. Elon's expression softened. His eyes, steady and kind, never left hers. Oprah, power is a funny thing. You can use it to build yourself up, or you can use it to lift others. My faith isn't about control. It's about freedom. Freedom from fear, from guilt, from chasing things that don't last. I talk about Jesus because I've seen what he does. For people like Daniel, for people like Sarah, for me. If that's power, it's not mine. It's his. He reached for the folded letter on his knee, holding it like a fragile treasure. This is from Daniel's mom, the boy with cancer. She thanked me for reminding her son that he wasn't alone. That's why I speak. Not to win arguments, not to gain followers, but to point people to the one who carried me when I couldn't walk on my own. The studio erupted. It wasn't the polite applause of earlier. It was raw, emotional, fractured. Some clapped loudly, others cried. A few whispered prayers under their breath. Oprah sat frozen. For the first time in her legendary career, she wasn't in control. The audience, the very lifeblood of her empire, was shifting. Not because of her, but because of him. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to form her next words. Elon, if what you're saying is true, then what does that make everything I've built? My courses, my books, my work with millions of people? What if I've been wrong? The words hung in the air, heavy and devastating. The audience gasped, stunned to see Oprah, the woman who had built an empire on certainty, voice her deepest fear. Musk leaned forward, his face softened with compassion. Oprah, it makes you human, just like the rest of us. And the good news is, grace isn't about what you've built or how perfect you've been. It's about what God offers when we stop trying to carry everything ourselves. The crowd was silent now, not with tension, but with reverence. They could sense it. Something sacred was happening before their eyes. The studio was no longer just a stage. It felt like a sanctuary. Oprah's eyes glistened with tears, her voice breaking as she whispered, "All my life I thought I had the answers. But maybe I've been pointing people to the wrong thing." The audience sat stunned. For the first time, the woman who had built her empire on certainty was admitting doubt. Elon Musk leaned closer, his tone gentle but resolute. Oprah, none of us get it all right. That's why grace exists. Jesus doesn't ask us to have it figured out. He meets us where we are. Oprah's composure cracked, tears streaming freely. The audience, many crying with her, rose in scattered applause, not for entertainment, but for truth. As the cameras faded out, Oprah's hand trembled as she reached for Musk's. "I don't know what comes next," she said softly. Musk nodded. "That's where faith begins." The show ended not with fanfare, but with silence, an unforgettable moment, where truth had pierced through spectacle. And even Oprah Winfrey was left humbled, searching, and changed.